man wearing the red shirt is a Hapkido instructor who wanted to test his style against the effectiveness of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. While he looks for the right distance to strike, I keep myself safely out of reach. In a surprise move, I will close the distance and take him down. My opponent is unfamiliar with ground fighting, and he no longer has the angle or the distance to be effective with his strikes. As he struggles to get me out, I establish myself on the top mounted position. A couple of hits is all I need to bring panic into the scene. Jumping from the frying pan into the fire, the Hapkido instructor desperately turns around, unaware that a choke awaits him. If you're interested in martial arts, remember this. Out on the street, reality boils down to one thing. The fight will always end up on the ground. This event happened in São Paulo, Brazil. The full contact representative, wearing knee pads, cannot stop the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter from closing the distance. Wasting no time, he takes the fight to the ground. Once the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter establishes himself in a mounted position, he throws an avalanche of punches. The full contact fighter has no option but to turn over, sacrificing his neck to a choke. This Gung Fu expert, wearing yellow trunks, has 15 years of training and claimed to be undefeated. At 180 pounds, he had a 15-pound advantage over my brother Royce. The Gung Fu man will rely on strikes in order to avoid going to the ground. It is almost impossible for a person trained primarily in punches and kicks to avoid being wrapped up and taken down by a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Royce is determined to close the gap and take the fight to the ground. As they go to the ground, he grabs Royce by the neck. Royce will establish his position before getting his neck out of the hold. He repeatedly hits his opponent on the ribs, forcing the Gung Fu man to let go. He maintains the top position. The leg work of the Gung Fu representative reveals that he is not knowledgeable in the intricacies of grappling. Royce is taking the time to study the situation and ride the opponent. At this point, Royce could easily apply a chokehold and finish the fight, but he elected not to. There are many variables when it comes to ground fighting. Through a systematic, step-by-step approach, we have organized it into a science. The opponent is obviously in good shape. When Royce applies this choke with the legs around the neck of the Gung Fu expert, he has absolute control. Instead of finishing the fight, he applies just enough pressure to prevent his opponent from getting away. He can take his time and chooses where to hit. The Kung Fu representative is totally helpless. Not only he's running out of air, but he cannot stop the blows. It's a terrifying feeling.
Okay, stop.
In this next confrontation, I spar with another Hapkido instructor. Since most martial arts focus primarily in punching and kicking, flexibility Power and speed are absolute prerequisites for those arts. Observe that as soon as I go into a clinch, the Hapkido instructor is deprived of his main requirement, the distance to strike. All the years of training are useless now, as soon as the fight goes to the ground. Out of desperation, he even tries to reach for my groin. As he feels the pressure on the choke increasing around his neck, he briefly struggles, then taps out. He acted like he was going to continue the fight, but realized that from this position it would not be a good idea. He wants a rematch, and I immediately take him down. I establish the mounted position, which makes him extremely vulnerable. The main advantage of this position is that I can punch him, but he cannot punch me back. As he struggles in vain to push me out, he exposes his arm. I could get him on an arm lock, but instead I choose to choke him out for the second time. He tries to reach for the groin, but the pressure on the neck makes him quickly change his mind. Still not convinced, he asks for a third match. His opponent is having a difficult time comprehending that his strikes are not as effective as he thought. It is hard for him to accept the painful reality that all his years of training may be in vain. Perhaps he'll never be able to understand what really happened. And what's worse, he may never consider incorporating Gracie Jiu-Jitsu into his training. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is the only self-defense system that effectively addresses ground grappling, the most important yet most neglected aspect of any real fight. Now the Hapkido instructor will be choked out for the third and final time. This is Royce in a judo tournament in California. As the opponent moves out of the ring to stop the fight, he is dragged back in. The referee, however, signals a new start. The judo man tries again to escape. Royce makes sure to keep him within the boundaries of the mat, so the fight will not have to be interrupted again. In judo rules, when you have your back pinned to the ground for 30 seconds, you lose the match. As the opponent lays on his stomach to prevent himself from being pinned, he forgot that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu's objective is not to score points, but to win the fight. Royce applies a choke, and the judo competitor passes out in painless defeat. In this next judo match, my brother Royler is on the right. Despite the fact that judo rules restrict the most lethal Gracie Jiu-Jitsu techniques, he placed second in the Brazilian Judo Championship. As they struggle for the perfect throw, they go down. The judo competitor tries to apply a headlock on Royler. The Gracie brother swiftly reverses the move, skillfully turning into an arm lock, and wins the match. The man in black is a modern Kung Fu instructor and is the next to come up against Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. The Kung Fu stylist's only chance is to keep the distance and stay on his feet. If he goes to the ground, he becomes vulnerable. Using a kick as a distraction, Royce closes the distance. Knowing his opponent cannot escape, Royce patiently works on bringing him down to the ground. He's in no hurry. A Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter becomes so confident on his ability to handle any aspect of a fight that he is able to maintain a calm and rational attitude. Royce has the opportunity to seriously hurt his opponent, but instead he only slaps him, a humane way to demonstrate the superiority of our unique system. He toys with him like a cat with a mouse. It is obvious that the Kung Fu man does not have the elements to avoid this embarrassing situation.
Ref, step back, please.
Nobody would endure this many slaps if there was any possibility of escape. When he feels like ending the fight, Royce will turn his opponent over and set him up for a final choke. Leverage, simplicity, and technique are the foundations for the effectiveness that has kept Gracie Jiu-Jitsu undefeated for over 65 years. This Kung Fu instructor requests a second match, thinking he can do better the second time around. Of course, if they were in a street fight and Royce had been intent on hurting him, he would not have that opportunity. Many martial arts experts do not practice or teach their students how to defend themselves under realistic conditions because they just don't know how. They ignore the fact that 95% of all real fights go into a clinch and end up on the ground, especially if your opponent is bigger and stronger than you. Remember, on the street, it is more difficult than you realize to use those fancy kicks and supposedly deadly punches. Back yourself up with the best ground fighting techniques in the world and make yourself a truly complete martial artist. Once again, the inevitable. Royce closes the distance and takes his opponent to the ground. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu enables you to choose from subtle control techniques to a wide variety of increasingly painful attacks. This time, my brother decides to be less merciful, so there can be no misunderstanding regarding the victor and thereby discouraging a possible third match. Royce has established his position on his opponent's back and can now choose where, when, and how hard to hit. It is important to notice that even here, Royce is using far less than full power in delivering his blows. When looking for a self-defense system, beware of the many styles that only teach one aspect of fighting. It can give you a false sense of security. If you're not learning how to defend yourself on the ground, how can you be truly prepared? At this point, the Kung Fu instructor knows he cannot escape. Having absorbed enough punishment, he will tap out.
Get over, George. He wants you on your stomach. Yes. Okay, good. Too many steps.
This is a 6-time Russian judo champion who also has had years of boxing training. He wanted to test his effectiveness in a street-like confrontation against Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Notice that even a judo stylist, a man familiar with basic ground grappling, is susceptible to the clinch and a takedown when trying to punch. Turning your back is the worst thing you can do in a fight against a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu expert. Once again, the slaps replace what could be much harder hits. With a quick choke, the fight is over. In spite of a 25-pound disadvantage, Royler Gracie had no problem closing the distance against this Kempo karate instructor, who claimed to have developed a street lethal style. The Kempo instructor intended to test his system against Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and then write an article for a martial arts magazine about his experience. This article later appeared in the April 1992 issue of Black Belt magazine. As you can see, the Kempo representative never had a chance. Once he was taken to the ground, he simply did not know what to do. A few hits, and he is reminded that limiting his training to only punching and kicking has left him completely defenseless against the painful reality of ground fighting. Unable to escape Royler's ruthless attack, he submits. In the second match, the Kempo representative believes he can succeed if only he's a little faster or a little more aggressive. Royler, as he has done 1,000 times, closes the distance, takes the fight to the ground, and latches onto his prey. Once the Gracie representative establishes his position on top, his opponent is convinced that further resistance will be futile and immediately surrenders. The man with the white tank top has been insulting the Gracie family. My brother Rickson slaps him on the face and challenges him on the spot. Though this footage is not very clear, it gives you a good idea of what to expect in a real street fight. The purpose of any self-defense should be to prepare you for the unpredictable reality of the streets. All martial arts are limited by rules which give their practitioners a false sense of security. Out on the street, if you have to fight for your life, there are no referees and no rules apply. A street fight is not what you want it to be or what you expect it to be. It simply is. Fights like this occurred frequently in Brazil, and it was in this kind of environment that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which has been undefeated for 65 years, established itself as the most complete and effective form of fighting in the world. The best chance to win a fight against a bigger and stronger opponent is to close the distance and take him to the ground. While this appears to be a mindless brawl, it is important that you understand that my brother Rickson, with the colorful trunks, is reacting to the moment-to-moment reality of the fight, and he is deliberately maneuvering his opponent to his doom. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu will prepare you to defend yourself where it really counts, out in the street, or in this case, a beach in Rio. Rickson, now mounted on the man who was claiming to be the champ, will punch him until he admits that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu still reigns. A fourth-generation member of the Gracie family uses a beautiful takedown against his Kung Fu opponent. This fight happened in São Paulo, Brazil. The Gracie representative will first establish his position on top. Now he can easily dodge the punches that are thrown at him while placing a choke that takes effect in no time. If this kind of finishing is becoming disturbingly repetitive, remember, these victories are not a matter of coincidence or luck. They are the result of calculated strategy and efficient training. For practitioners of the striking arts, not knowing how to escape from the clinch and what to do once you get to the ground is more than a weakness. It's fatal. In this next match, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is wearing white shorts. His opponent, a kickboxer, cannot stop the clinch and the fight goes to the ground. Scheduled for 2 rounds of 15 minutes, the basic rules are no eye gouging, no groin shots, and no bites. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu representative wants to establish his position on top. Observe the kickboxer is trying to get to the ropes. He will try to reach the ropes with his foot, hoping that the referee will stop the match. In this kind of matches, however, the fights do not stop when you touch the ropes. The referee has been instructed to drag the combatants back into the ring so that the fight could go on as it would in real life. The kickboxer continues to try to pull himself out. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter's main concern is to maintain the top-mounted position. He's aware of the agony of the man on the bottom. The referee untangles the kickboxer's foot from the ropes. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu representative is in no hurry. Desperately, the kickboxer drags himself to the edge of the ring. He will be pushed back by the crowd and the referee. When the kickboxer finally manages to roll out, he'll have his neck wrapped by the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter in a dangerous chokehold. Notice that the kickboxer very discreetly tapping out on the head of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter. As the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter lets go, the kickboxer claims he did not tap and continues on. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter immediately applies another choke with his legs, followed by an arm lock. The choke would put him to sleep, and he would not feel the pain of his broken arm until later. However, the kickboxer shamelessly throws himself out of the ring, forcing the referee to stop the match. There is so much confusion that 3 minutes into the round, an unbelievable decision is made: to ring the bell before the 15-minute round is over. That saves the kickboxer temporarily from further punishment. The round continues with the kickboxer trying to maintain the distance and the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter looking for the right opportunity to clinch. Although it's not inconceivable that an opponent could land the perfect punch or kick, a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is always playing the odds. And the odds are in his favor, since most fights will go to a clinch and eventually end on the ground. As the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter rushes in, the kickboxer once again will pull himself out of the ropes. Somebody in the audience, disgusted by the kickboxer's tactics, pushes the fighters back in the ring. They are too far out, however, and the referee is forced to stop the match again. This is a good example that when you try to stop an opponent with just punches and kicks, it may be more difficult than you realize. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter will close the distance. And once again, you will notice the desperate attitude of the kickboxer, trying to escape to the ropes. But his legs get stuck. Anticipating the agony of being taken to the ground, the kickboxer does everything he can to step out of the ring with both legs, literally asking the referee to stop the fight. This time, however, the referee refuses to grant his cowardly request and allows the fight to continue. Once again, the inevitable happens and they go to the ground. Like most practitioners of the striking arts, this kickboxer had no idea of what to do on the ground. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu man will rush in one more time. The kickboxer reaches for the safety of the ropes. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu will apply a choke, holding it long enough to make the kickboxer realize that he does not have a chance. When the choke is finally released, you can see the kickboxer is done. Regardless of execution, any style based primarily on striking techniques is vulnerable to the clinch, takedown, and the grappling finish. You are now going to see some fights that took place in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and were shown on national television. In this first combat, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is wearing black trunks and weighs 160 pounds. The challenger, wearing purple trunks, also weighs 160 pounds. As in the previous fights, these next 3 matches had no point system and were scheduled for 2 rounds of 15 minutes each. The challengers labeled themselves freestyle fighters and had extensive training in kickboxing, wrestling, and even some jiu-jitsu. In fact, their limited training in jiu-jitsu is what saved them from a virtual massacre. The freestyle representatives claimed that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners only knew how to fight on the ground and bragged that they would never be taken down. They were confident of victory. They promised that these matches would end the reign of the Gracie family. You will see how misinformed they were. The contenders on both sides had nursed personal grudges through the media during the months preceding the event. When these fights finally happened, both teams were determined to inflict painful damage. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighters decided to use this opportunity to teach a lesson to all practitioners of the striking arts. Instead of using their devastating finishing holds, they would beat their challengers at their own game of punches and kicks. If you plan on winning a fight using only strikes, remember, your opponent can always strike back. Although these matches are violent, protective measures are taken to avoid excessive harm to the contenders. In order to maximize the action, regulations are brought down to a minimum and are very simple. No eye gouging, no groin shots, and no biting. Everything else is permitted. Since the dawn of time, men have been fighting both individually and on the battlefield. Out of their basic need to survive, the martial skills were born. Gradually, civilization brought peace out of war, order out of chaos. As the need for hand-to-hand combat declined, practitioners of the martial skills soon found other purpose for their techniques. Some organized their techniques into disciplines, dedicated to a philosophical meaning. Martial skill became martial art, while others developed rules and protective equipment, allowing men to compete without serious injury, nurturing the sportive aspect of their once crippling techniques. Techniques once devised for life and death conflicts became diluted, out of touch with reality, or tailored to suit some social requirement. It is a serious mistake to compare a champion of boxing, wrestling, or any martial arts, no matter how prestigious, to the ultimate fighter. Championship titles represent a degree of expertise within a very specific and limited range of combat. They are not intended, nor should they be mistaken as proof of a fighter's true ability in a realistic street situation. The reality of street fighting can be extremely exhausting, and you should be as prepared as you possibly can to deal with this kind of eventuality. Keep in mind that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is purposely not using the finishing techniques he knows to end the fight. He wants to prove a point that he can beat his challenger at his own game of punching and kicking. When they fall to the ground, the bell will ring, but the crowd is so loud that the referee will not hear, and the fight continues for a few more seconds. In these fights, there's no point system. You win, lose, or draw. Usually, 2 men will walk in the ring, and only one will walk out. For time purposes, this first round has been edited down. Here are some highlights of the first moments of the fight. to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu using the traumatisms of punches and headbutts. This is the second round. In our times, social pressures have given rise to a new era of violence. The prospect of personal attack is larger than at any time this century. If you study the martial arts for the purpose of self-defense, beware. Many styles teach only a single, high-stilted aspect of true fighting. Students of these styles graduate believing they have mastered the skills required to handle a real-life threatening situation. Often, and tragically, they discover too late that their techniques fall far short from addressing the realities of street combat. Imagine your opponent is 50 pounds heavier and a foot taller than you. Even if you break his nose with a perfect punch, he would probably still keep fighting. What if he takes you to the ground, sits on top of you, and starts punching away? What will you do? Remember, there are no referees on the street to save your skin. Let's go back to the action. This type of match is as close as you possibly can get to a street fight. Since they have no gloves or protective gear of any kind, punching like this can be particularly painful to the hands, especially when striking the face or the head. A major weakness of the various striking arts is that they are limited by rules that stop the match when the fighters go into a clinch. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter stays really close and prevents the freestyle representative from getting up. He now has his opponent's head against the rope and uses it as an easy target for the headbutts. They are too close to each other for the punches to be effective. Observe the big cut on the eye of the freestyle fighter. The freestyle fighter will pull himself outside of the ring again, forcing an interruption of the match. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu representative does not want to stop fighting, and when pushed back, he argues with the referee. Adrenaline and sweat also makes it almost impossible to finish this fight with one blow. This match is a good example of how difficult it can be to stop an opponent with just punches and kicks. He could strike back, and then it becomes a test of endurance and conditioning to see who can take the most punishment. The freestyle representative is taken down and tries to pull himself outside the rope once again. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter grabs his feet and drags him back into the ring. For those people who think they can keep an opponent away with the use of strikes, remember, you are only at an arm's length distance. Just one step and your opponent is all over you. Let me remind you that the freestyle fighter claimed that he would never be taken down. Furthermore, he said he would outpunch the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter. That is why the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is purposely not using the ground fighting techniques he knows. Instead, he wants to punish his opponent. Even if you hit the perfect spot and give your opponent a bloody nose or a black eye, it doesn't mean the fight is over. Regardless of your experience as a martial artist, back yourself up with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, because if your opponent is bigger, heavier, or stronger, chances are you will be taken to the ground. By now you understand how serious that can be. This kind of all-out combat is exhausting and quickly takes its toll on the contenders who often grab onto each other to rest. Now, running out of energy, the freestyle fighter realizes he failed to outpunch the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu man. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu representative, on the other hand, is growing in confidence and eager to finish what he came here for. Observe that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter can easily take the fight to the ground anytime he chooses. Out of desperation, the freestyle representative once again works his way out of the ring. This time, however, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter relentlessly chases his opponent out of the ring, into the midst of the crowd to continue the merciless beating. When the crowd finally breaks the fight apart, the freestyle representative is convinced he cannot find safety, not even outside of the ring. He grabs onto his coach and won't let go. He knows that going back would only mean more pain and suffering. As the referee counts down, officializing another Gracie Jiu-Jitsu victory, the audience goes into a frenzy. The second match of this event, also scheduled for 2 rounds of 15 minutes each, has the same basic rules. No eye gouging, no groin shots, and no biting. All else is allowed. These contenders are in a heavier weight class. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter with the black trunks weighs 180 pounds, and the freestyle representative with the red trunks weighs 190 pounds. There is a distinct difference in the approach taken by this Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter who is looking for closer contact. Observe that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter has the confidence to close the distance anytime he wants. This advantage is priceless. I'm now going to take a few minutes to talk about Hélio Gracie, the mastermind behind Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. My father, Hélio Gracie, originally learned the traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu when he was a teenager. With the insignificant weight of only 140 pounds, he noticed that many of those traditional techniques required too much strength and did not solve all the problems that could occur in a real fight, especially against a larger opponent. Hélio was determined to improve the system until it was truly effective. He believed that if it could work for him, it could work for anybody. He devoted his life to developing and testing his techniques against all kinds of fighters, under the most adverse conditions, both in the ring and on the street, usually against heavier opponents. He actually fought men double his own weight. There is an annoying tendency in the martial arts community to venerate a style or an instructor simply on the basis of tradition. Old is better. Individual styles jealously represent themselves as the only rightful keeper of the flame, deriding innovation or free exchange of ideas with the stubbornness of mules. If other fields of human endeavor resisted change with the same vigor, we would still be seen by torchlight and bleeding ourselves with leeches to cure disease. The only true test of an art's worthiness should be its effectiveness in combat. Using this as a measuring stick, no style stands taller than Hélio Gracie's devastating Jiu-Jitsu. We are now back to the fight. While exchanging some hits, ultimately, the objective of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is to corner his opponent and take him to the ground. Let me remind you that to rely on strictly punches and kicks to finish with an opponent, it might be more difficult than one realizes. While exchanging some hits, ultimately, the objective of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is to corner his opponent and take him to the ground. Anticipating more pain and agony, the freestyle representative runs out of the ring for safety. Psychologically, he has already been defeated. The referee urges him to return, and he crawls back into the ring, not quite sure if he should be there at this point. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter knows that if an opponent runs away once, he is inclined to do it again. By now, the freestyle representative realizes that his punches and kicks are not enough to stop the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter, who besides punching and kicking, has the knowledge and the confidence to handle the fight on the ground. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is getting ready to make his move again. As soon as he feels the intensity of his predator, the freestyle representative desperately rushes out of the ring. This time is for good. As the crowd chants the seconds away, another challenger bites the dust. This is the third and final fight of this event, also scheduled for 2 rounds of 15 minutes each. With the exception of eye gouging, groin shots, and biting, all else is permitted. With this kind of freedom, it's very unlikely that a match such as this would end up in a draw. The brutal intensity of these fights will more than likely bring forth a winner. This is the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter, weighing 185 pounds, and his opponent, the freestyle representative, comes in weighing 205 pounds. In order to prepare for this fight, the freestyle representative supposedly had some jiu-jitsu training, in hopes that it would give him the elements to win this fight. Observe, they have no protective gear of any kind. Remember that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter does not want to use the finishing techniques he knows. He wants to defeat his opponent at his own game of punches and kicks. So now they're down to it. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter with black trunks and the freestyle representative with the white trunks. When I came to the United States in the late 70s, I had a dream to make Gracie Jiu-Jitsu known to the world. I was shocked to discover that the martial arts community was not addressing ground combat, the most important aspect of real fighting. How could this be possible? Didn't they realize most fights will end up on the ground? Sure, there were a few styles which made a pretense of addressing grappling techniques, but I couldn't find any instructors who were preparing their students for the real thing. If your art overlooks ground fighting, a most predictable and dangerous situation, how can you be truly prepared? It was as if a vacuum existed within the very heart of the martial arts community. A dangerous void which had either been overlooked or deliberately ignored. I soon realized the magnitude of my task, to awaken my fellow martial artists all over the world to the crucial importance of ground fighting. The news that something was missing in terms of combat strategy and that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu had the answer hit like a bomb, shaking the foundation of the martial arts establishment. I knew it would mean stepping on some very big toes, but I could not ignore the need of the majority to protect the pride of a few. So I issued the Gracie Challenge, the same challenge that the Gracie family and its representatives have defended for the last 65 years, to fight in real combat against any opponent of any style at any time. The purpose of our challenge is not to promote ourselves as the deadliest fighters in the world. Rather, it is our intention to show, using scientific and empirical standards, that the techniques and strategies of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu are consistently and measurably superior to the other styles. In the field of science, the results of a single experiment are never accepted as fact. Scientific standards insist that an experiment must be repeated again and again, and that each repetition must produce identical results before a formula or theory is accepted. By testing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu against style after style, we have built an irrefutable body of evidence as to the devastating effectiveness of our approach. More importantly, we have successfully been doing this for over 65 years. Weight difference was never a reason for us not to enter a ring. We have countless times matched ourselves against opponents of greater weight and size, in the ring and on the street. In the Orient, this kind of challenge was common practice in the old days. Presently, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is the only martial art that offers this kind of open invitation. The Gracie Challenge has generated some hostility from a few. Thankfully, a much larger number of people believe our intentions are good and understand the importance of the challenge. It has earned us the respect of all those looking for a truly reliable fighting system. The Gracie Challenge is a moral issue. It must exist, for it represents the absolute confidence we have in our system. Our goal in continuing the challenge is to expose and spread the truth about real fighting. Truth is the quality that moves us forward, expands our horizons, and ultimately sets us free. We should never fear it. Those who do so perhaps because they have something to hide. Perhaps they worry that the relentless light of truth may expose the inadequacies, or worse, the deliberate deceptions in their own worlds. I want to clarify that we respect all the other martial arts. Each one has its strong points. Jiu-Jitsu itself is a combination of different styles. However, we feel that individually they have limitations in terms of effectiveness and practicality. As I said, when I first came to the United States, there was nothing being taught which even approached the reality of ground fighting. In the years since, it has been most gratifying to meet and educate the hundreds of martial artists who have come to us in search of the absolute best in realistic fighting skills. It has also been amusing to watch the flood of imitators and pretenders to the throne who have rushed to capitalize on the sudden demand for information on effective ground fighting. How far opinions have shifted since the arrival of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We're back to the fight. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter is trying to get away from inside his opponent's legs so that he may establish a solid position on top. It is easy to see when fighters are close together like this, they cannot really hurt each other too much. The trick is to fight for a good position. Then you will have the good angle to hit your opponent, but be out of reach from his punches. They are both very strong and can withstand each other's punches. Sometimes you don't see much action. It may appear that they are only holding on to each other. But don't fool yourself. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. Every little move counts, leading into something else. Even waiting has a purpose, not to mention that gives them the opportunity to rest. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu man knows that simply punching a man like this would be a difficult task. So his goal is to get a position where he can hit without being interrupted. Ultimately, he will look for the mounted position. Like playing chess, he can use his knowledge of ground fighting to anticipate his plan of action. His familiarity with ground fighting gives him the confidence to make the proper sequence of techniques that will lead him to victory. He has his leg trapped, but you will notice him untangling the leg to establish the top position. Now he will push his opponent's leg out of the way. Here he goes, making his move. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter will take his time and make sure that his opponent will not escape. The crowd senses the end is near, and as the man on the bottom realizes he cannot escape, he will signal to the referee to stop the savage onslaught. The freestyle representative, who claimed he had learned some jiu-jitsu, will now understand two things. First, he did not learn enough. And second, the little he learned was not the real Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.